Stillwater Planning Commission meeting of December 5th is called to order. It will be the process this evening to call for items on the agenda. The commission will hear briefly from staff first, then the applicant and/or their representative, and then open the public hearing and hear from those in favor and/or in opposition of the request. When you come to the podium, please clearly state your name and address for the record. And before closing the public hearing, both staff, the applicant, and/or their representative will be provided an opportunity to respond and provide additional information and answer the questions. After all interested parties have spoken, the public hearing will be closed, and we will hear closing remarks and alternatives from staff. With that, the first item on the agenda this evening is a specific use permit, SUP 2308, and we'll hear from staff.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jacqueline Porter, presenting this specific use permit on behalf of the Planning Department. This specific use permit is to allow the height of a telecommunication tower to exceed at 75 feet, located at the property addressed as 623 East 8th Avenue. The subject property is located near the intersection of South Perkins Road and East 8th Avenue on the south side of East 8th. The subject property is the location of the City Public Works Maintenance Barn. It's located on the subject property. To the west of the property is the Collection Center, as well as El Tapito.
I'll tap it to you.
Okay. You can tell I'm not from around here. All right. Here's a street view looking south to the subject property on East 8th Avenue. The property is zoned public with similar zoning to the east and south. Commercial general and small lot single family residential is located to the west, and light industrial is located to the north. In May 2023, PC approved a SUP to allow a telecommunication tower for emergency response at the property address as 4220, I will get there eventually, North Perkins Road. Unfortunately, the city's emergency management team and their contractors had to abandon that location for the proposed tower. After further research and appropriate clarifying documents, city's emergency management team and the contractors finally were able to identify the subject property as a new location. They are proposing a 419-foot tower to be located in the southeast corner of the subject property. The tower is designed to withstand 116 mile per hour basic wind and 400 mile per hour basic winds with 1.5 inch of ice. Rob Hill, the Director of Emergency Management, and members of Intertech are here tonight to answer any of your questions. Are there any questions for planning staff at this time?
Any questions for staff? I think the one question I did have, Jackie, when we looked at the location on North Perkins Road, do you remember how tall that one was?
Not off the top of my head.
Rob, do you remember how tall that one was?
Our goal was for 400 feet, but the FAA capped the tower height at about 280.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it was not adequate coverage for the city of Stillwater.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for staff? All right. Thanks, Jackie. Okay. So then at this time, if there's anything that the city would like to add on the application, any questions from commissioners on anything? I did have one other question. In looking at the tower design notes, it lists a theoretic 0 fall radius, and I was wondering if someone could explain what a theoretic 0 radius fall zone is.
Good evening. My name is Harmony Clark-Ryder. I'm with Intertech Resources. Sorry. Better. Harmony Clark-Ryder, Intertech Resources. So a theoretical fall radius is that the tower is designed to collapse in on itself and not to exceed its base. So basically, if the tower to fall, it's not going to exceed the compound that surrounds it.
So the structural design is that it'll just compress upon itself and it won't tip over one way or the other?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. That was what I assumed, but just wanted to ask that question.
Is that under normal conditions or is that under the 116-mile-an-hour wind conditions?
That's with the
With the
additional
wind.
wind
Okay.
conditions. Yes.
All right. Yeah, that really took care of the question that I had for it. Looking at the information that was in the packet and looking at kind of the radiuses and those sorts of things. So, any
Okay.
other questions? Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Commissioners, anyone entertaining a motion?
Chairman, we need to open the public hearing.
Okay. Sorry, thank you. This time we can open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item to come forward. Seeing none, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to present findings and alternatives.
All right, staff's finding, the Land Development Code allows the height of a telecommunication tower to exceed 75 feet with a specific use permit, and the comprehensive plan calls for it to be public at the property's location, and it is zoned public. Your alternatives tonight is accept findings and recommend that City Council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented, or find that the specific use permit is not an appropriate use for the property based upon the impact to the surrounding vicinity, and do not recommend that the City Council approve the request, or find that additional information or discussion is needed prior to making a recommendation and table the request to a certain date.
Thank you. So I'll ask if there's a motion.
I'll motion to accept the findings and recommend that City Council approve the proposed specific use permit as presented.
Second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Believe.
Chair, the voting software is not operating, so we will conduct a verbal roll call.
Okay.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Van Woody?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a short-term rental, STR 0129. And this is consideration, discussion, and possible action, including a recommendation or approval, denial of an application for short-term rental for a property addressed as 1015 West Graham. We'll hear from staff first.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Diana Hood. I'm the Associate City Planner, presenting this item on behalf of staff tonight. As stated, this request is for a license to operate a short-term rental at the property addressed as 1015 West Graham Avenue. Here's an area map of the subject property. It's located off of Graham Street, near Washington. As a reminder, the Planning Commission is the hearing body for short-term rentals, and the hearing is held similar to a specific use permit hearing, except that there is no staff report or presentation. The city cannot enforce private restrictions or covenants, but you can give weight to them as part of the deliberative process. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
No questions from staff? For staff? Okay. All right. Thank you. So this time, we would offer an opportunity for the applicant to come forward and offer any additional information on this request. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Zheng Han, so I'm representing me and my wife, Yuecheng Wu, for this permit. So first I want to state the purpose of this application. So we bought this house for our parents. Because of visa issues, they can't stay here for a longer time, only half a year at a time. So we want to put the free weekend time to use to do some short-term rental to pay the mortgage. So basically, this is not about an investment property. It's about a plan or a dream to allow us to live as our parents, meanwhile not breaking the bank. So I do want to say this is our first time to do this kind of application, and of course we made some mistakes. I really apologize for that. And I have met with my neighbors, and I have learned their opinions, their comments, their concerns. So I do want to say I want to address all their comments. And if the application were to be approved, I want to enforce street house rules so that the neighbors won't be disturbed, and ask the renters to respect our neighbors, to keep it the same as the current situation, a safe and quiet neighborhood. We want to keep it that way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, you said your parents have visa issues. So is the idea that they would come for part of the year
Mhm.
and then they would be gone and then they would come back?
Yeah.
So it would just cycle
Yeah.
in some intervals?
Yeah. Until they get green card, they can stay permanently.
Okay.
Okay.
So I mean, my question was, therefore, in my mind, you would be motivated to keep the property in really good condition because your parents are going to be coming back every so many months.
Yeah, definitely. So we renovated this house ourselves. We treated it as our own house. So we have no experience in making Airbnb. We just make it like our home. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
How do you intend to keep the peace and quiet in the neighborhood when you lease out the short-term rental?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
How do you intend
how
to
do I?
keep
Okay.
the peace and quiet? Not that you intend to, but how are you enforce that?
Yeah. So as I said, I want to enforce strict house rules. For example, quiet time, making any time after 8 p.m., any time before 7 a.m. as quiet time, and ask them to dress appropriately outside the house. No smoking, no partying. So yeah, that's one way. Another way is to screen the renters. Like in the platform, we have the choice to see the reviews of the renters. We can actually reject a request to stay if they have bad record. Yeah.
Do you plan to use the Airbnb platform?
Yes. Yes.
And do you have a minimum number of nights?
Yeah. It's 2 days.
Two nights.
Yeah.
Okay.
There were some comments in a couple of the protest letters that this property was already listed on Airbnb prior to approval of the short-term rental.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a mistake I made. So this is the first time we did it, and we were really inexperienced. After that, we put the listing off. Yeah.
I'm just curious, how close do you live to this property?
Yeah, we live in the west side of the city. Yeah, Sinner district.
So it's like
Sinner.
10 minutes?
Yeah,
5
10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can get there pretty quickly if you needed to.
Yeah, yeah, and we work in OSU, so we can come in
Yeah.
even we're at work. Yeah.
Okay. And you plan to manage it yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
How many guests are you allowing at your property?
The maximum right now is 8, because we have 4 bedrooms, so that's 8. Yeah.
Sufficient parking?
Yeah, we have sufficient parking. Yeah, in the garage and on the driveway, we have a lot of spaces.
Any other questions? All right, thank you so much. At this time, we'll open the public hearing, and we'll ask for those in favor to come forward at this time. Seeing none, I'll open and ask for those in objection to come forward, in opposition. And I do have some names who've already signed up. And the first name on the list is Emily Thaden. Oh, and we do have a time limit of 3 minutes per speaker. So we would ask that if you would just kind of try to keep your comments to a minimum, and for the people who come up in succession afterwards, if you would try not to duplicate the same topics as the people in front of you. So thank you, Ms. Thaden.
My name is Emily Thaden. Address is 1023 West Graham Avenue. It's right next to this this property. So I'm objecting. Like I don't want to live next to the short-term rental. I was at the previous one. The house diagonal across the street from me is now a short-term rental. We've got trucks everywhere now. I see you have a whole bunch of people here in objection to different short-term rentals. I read this at the last objection. I'm going to read it one more time. That in the Stillwater City Ordinance, the purpose of a residential district is to protect the residential character of the included areas by limiting commercial activities and encourage a suitable environment for family life. Now, when you have short-term renters coming in to a quiet residential neighborhood, they park where they want. They don't know where they're going. The current tenant at the house in question right now, they had trash out on the lawn. There are 3 tiny dogs yap at me every time I try to do anything out in my yard. Like, it is not fun. It's not okay. It's not a peaceful experience to live next to short-term rentals. And it is just infuriating that the city of Stillwater is just deciding that this is okay. You guys will be fine, and there's just no. I've been submitting objections to this because yes, they applied for this the license on August 25, and by Labor Day weekend they already had people there, and several others after that. It wasn't like oops, a one-time mistake and then it was done. So I am not confident that the rules are going to be followed because there's just no precedent of that yet. And as for his parents have been here this all summer long. I've seen him a lot. If it was so critical that they bought this house for his parents, why aren't they there? Like, why didn't they move in at any point? They fixed this house up and threw it on Airbnb as soon as they possibly could. This is a business opportunity. I am sympathetic I have Asian in-laws myself. I'm sympathetic to the visa issues. Never in a million years would they be okay with me buying a house on the other side of town, a smaller house for them to live in while they come halfway around the globe to be here. So I just don't believe a word he's saying about this. Okay. From what I've already had to deal with, I don't want this. It's not okay. This is right next door to my house where I'm raising my kids. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Next name on the list is Zhang Han. That's you. Okay. All right. Anyone else in the audience this evening wishing to speak in opposition on this particular item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask to hear from staff.
All right. So for tonight, the alternatives are to either approve this application, you may defer for additional discussion, or you have the option to deny the application.
All right. Thank you. Commissioners, discussion?
Am I allowed to bring this up? But is there tentative discussions about looking at a revised policy for STRs?
Commissioners' concerns have been submitted to the city manager's office, and staff internally has been drafting revisions for city manager's office and planning commissioner and city council approval. I do not have a timeline though.
Okay. Quite frankly, I'd like to table these STRs till we see a revised policy and consider it.
That kind of sounds like you're wanting to put a moratorium, and the commissioners don't have that authority.
I'm
If you need more,
tabling it.
if you need more information to make a decision, it can be tabled to a date certain. But I do not have a timeline when that ordinance will be presented to commissioners and then further to the council.
These, if we do have an amendment to the text, those that are prior that have applied for have to be considered before and can't have the applicable of the old, except for the only thing that we can enforce would be when we adopt that text amendment is some of the enforcement, but not for your consideration. It would have to be prior to the text amendment for these items.
So if I understand what you're saying, Jackie, any application that comes in to the city and is dated previous to when the new direction is in place, those would go under the system we currently have.
Correct.
Anything that comes in after that is approved would then fall underneath that criterion.
Correct.
Okay. So all of these that have come to us before, we have to consider in the current system.
Correct.
And they would come back to the commission. If a new system is in place, these would still have to come back to you for consideration, as that's what the ordinance said at the time they implied.
Okay.
What are the current guidelines or regulations for rentals that were being ran without the specific use permit?
What can occur if they do not have a license, they operate without one, they can be cited. They can be cited daily for that violation, if the city is made aware. If you would like, I can refer you to an ordinance that lists considerations that you may take into consideration in deciding to approve or deny the application. And the ordinance says you can consider the effect of the proposed use upon the character of the neighborhood, traffic conditions, the effect of public utilities, drainage, and other matters related to the general welfare of the citizens.
I guess I think that, all of these that come before us, they're challenging, as we've talked about several times in this forum. So the concerns that were raised really about the intended purpose for this, I don't know exactly what to do with that, but I've sort of come to the conclusion sitting here thinking that whether or not the intended purpose is for a rental or for parents to stay there I don't know how much that impacts the decision, because it's either going to be a short-term rental or not. I mean, if it was always intended to be a short-term rental, I guess it's maybe a more palatable story. But I can't really say. I don't know what the intention was there. It's hard to know that. So just a couple of different versions of really what that is. And so I don't know what to do with that. I think the general way we've approached these is that, you know, the property owner has rights that have not been mitigated by provisions in city ordinances. So given some unusual circumstance related to a specific property, we generally approve these. And then if there's an issue, there are ways for that to be dealt with by the neighbors. And so, you know, given any really no other seemingly logical path for us to take, I think that's usually where we end up. So, you know, it's just hard to say what will happen in the future. So there are provisions for neighbors to address real issues as they come up, and they can get the short-term rental permit revoked. So anyway, that's, you know, when there's conflicts on almost all of these between neighbors that exist in the property, concerns about the character of their neighborhood, which I get that. But then somebody buys a property, invests their money, and they have a legal route to do that. I think we might have not approved one, maybe over parking, which we could see that it just didn't make sense. But I don't recall other than that. So those are my random thoughts, I guess.
I think in this particular neighborhood, we've had this neighborhood come up several times.
Yes.
And I think one of the most compelling things that I've seen in this particular neighborhood is this neighborhood seemed to be in flux, and it seems that the transient nature that it's becoming is beginning to change the character of the neighborhood. And one of the things that Ms. Thaden did read was about a residential character, and then it's a suitable character for family life. We also have a handful of objection letters, and we have 3 incidents that were recorded by the city of the property being rented without having the short-term rental application approved. For the reason of repetitive short-term rental being rented without a proper application, and for the change in the character of the neighborhood that was noted by the neighbors, I would not be in favor of approving this particular application.
Yeah, yes, I concur with that analysis.
Okay, Chair will jump out and make a motion to deny this application based on grounds of operating without a proper application and observed change in the character of the neighborhood due to that action.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote.
second?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I was busy writing. Let's see. Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Prather,
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Van Luven.
Yes.
Motion to deny the application passes 5-0.
Next item on the agenda is a short-term rental. Consideration, discussion, and possible action, including recommendation, approval, or denial of an application for a property addressed as 1607 South Berkshire Drive. We shall hear from staff first.
As previously stated, this is another request for a short-term rental license for the property addressed as 1607 South Berkshire Drive. Here's an area map of the subject property. It is just south of 15th Street, near Berkshire Drive. As a reminder, the hearing is to be held similar to a specific use permit, and the city cannot enforce private restrictions or covenants, but can give weight to them as part of the deliberative process. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
See any questions for staff? Thank you. At this time, I would ask if the applicant would like to come forward. I'm not seeing the applicant. So we will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone that would like to, hold on just a moment, get my papers here. 1607. There was no one listed? Okay, thank you. All right. So at this time, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item. And seeing none, we will close the public hearing and ask staff to present our alternatives.
Similarly to the previous item, the alternatives are to approve the application, defer for additional discussion, or to deny the application.
I'll motion to table this one for additional discussion to the next planning commission dated December
19th, I believe, is the next one.
19th.
I would like to advise the board that at present we will have 2 members not in attendance, so there will be 3 members in attendance, or we can move to the first meeting in January.
Let's do the first meeting in January on January
Will be January 9th,
9th,
2024.
2024 at 5:30.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to table this item to January 9th.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Prather,
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Van Luven.
Yes.
This item is tabled till January 9th, 2024. Hard to say that year.
The next item on the agenda is a short-term rental for consideration, discussion, and possible action, including recommendation, approval, or denial of an application for a property addressed at 910 South Ridge. We shall hear from staff first.
All right. Once again, this is an application for a short-term rental license for the property addressed as 910 South Ridge Drive. Here's an area map of the subject property. It is to the south of 9th Street and east of Western Avenue in a residential subdivision. Similar to the other previous items, the city cannot enforce private covenants, but can give weight to them. And the hearing is similar to a specific use permit hearing. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
I don't see any questions for staff. Thank you. At this time, we'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to come forward. If you'd state your name and address for the record, please.
Hello, my name is Jared Tomlin. I live at 910 Southridge Drive. My wife, Ashton, and I are seeking a short-term rental license for this property. This is where we live. This is where we do life. We bought this house around a year ago, and in this house we work, we live here, we do life here. So 5 days a week from 9 to noon, we're officing there, or we're officing down the street at Aspen Coffee on Western. We host meetings in our home with our community groups. We're doing meetings throughout the city of Stillwater throughout the work week from Monday through Friday. So we're here. We are digging roots here. We're expecting our first child this February 3rd, 2024, and we're excited to raise our child here in Stillwater. We went to school here. We graduated from OSU. We stayed here to plant roots here. We live here, and we live in this home. This is a home that we worked hard to pay off student debt to buy. We remodeled it with our own hard-earned money. I built a lot of the things in the home. It's not like we ordered something offline and sent them to a different house and we're never seeing them. These are the things that we see every single day. The kitchen stuff that we see in our home and use are things that we use every single day. We highly value the things that we have put into our home and the things that we have in our home, because that's our hard-earned money that we put into that. And I think this is important for a couple of reasons when it's regarding a short-term rental license. And before I get to that, I left out that we also attend a community group on Sunday evenings from 5:30 to 8:30. So this all ties us to Stillwater. We work here, we live here, we have events in our home, we do events in Stillwater with community groups, so we're here very frequently throughout the week. This is a home that we actively live in. And that's significant for two reasons when it comes to a short-term rental license, is that we have a high standard for who rents our home. That we don't want someone just to come in our home and trash our home. We have a high standard because we live there, because we're going to raise our child there, because we do life there, because we host community groups there, because this is our home. This is the reality of the things that we put into this home are the things that we care a lot about. So we have a high value on who would potentially rent this home as a short-term rental license. The second reason why this is important is because we must be here 5 days a week, at least Monday through Friday. This is where we work. Throughout Stillwater, we are working and having meetings and hosting people in this home as well. So really, it would just be looking to lease our home or rent our home on a short-term rental license at a limited capacity of really just the weekends or when we already go out of town to see family. So I think of game days, I think of graduation, I think of the times that we go see her family in Tulsa or my family in Fort Worth. Those are the times that we would be looking to short-term rental license our home to other people. Yes, and with all that being said, those two reasons, with the thought of people renting our home, we would have a filter of, hey, who do we want to rent our home? We have rules that we would set in place for our home to filter through, hey, is this person who's requesting to book our home, are they the right fit? Or are we comfortable with packing up our newborn child, going to Tulsa for the weekend for the sake of this person renting our home? So we would take every applicant and we would see, hey, is this something that we are comfortable with doing, because we put our hard-earned money into this home, and we live there. We live there constantly. Every single day we're there, moving throughout our home. And some of the rules that we would have for the short-term rental license is, number one, that there would be no parties or large group gatherings at this home. There would be no excessive drinking, and you could filter this through the Airbnb app, where a person has to request to book your home. They can't just instantly click and they have access to your home. They would request a book, and then I would send them a list of these rules and say, hey, will you obey these rules? To book our house, you must agree to obeying these rules. And if they agree to that, then I would look through past reviews that they have through the Airbnb app and see, hey, is this person a good fit? Do we think they would take care of our home and value the things that we have in our home? And if so, then I would accept that person. Some other rules we have is a minimum 2-night stay. No local stays for anyone in Stillwater. So someone in Stillwater can't just come and stay at our house for any given reason. I think, to me, that sends a red flag of a potential party or large group gathering that would not be a benefit to us. at all. Limiting the amount of cars to the property of no more than 4. So we have a 2-car garage, and then we have plenty of space in our driveway for 4 cars to be there at one time. So there would be no parking on the street. I understand that our street, there's parking on both sides of the street that are accessible, but I would not want anyone parking on the street. I would want them to stay in the driveway because there's room there for them to do that. We would instill quiet hours from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. I value our neighbors. I value the city. I value keeping the culture in our neighborhood true to what it is. So I don't want our neighbors to cause a ruckus in the evenings. And with that, I have blink cameras over my driveway and in my backyard, and I'm able to monitor that wherever I go. If we were to go to Tulsa, if we were to go to Fort Worth, Texas, I could pull open that app and monitor. Hey, is there loud movement? Is there movement past 10 p.m. in the backyard? And I would be able to contact that host and say, hey, or that guest and say, hey, we would like you to move inside to honor the quiet hours that we've instilled with booking our home. We're limiting the amount of people to 6 people that could stay at one time. So our house is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, but we are only renting 2 bedrooms and 1 bath at a time. So that limits the number of people that can actually stay there. So there's a queen bed, and then there's a king bed in one room, and then there's an air mattress that someone could sleep on or on our couch as well. So only 6 people could stay at our home at one time. So there's a limited number of people that could stay there to limit that factor of a loud noise or disturbance of the neighborhood or even the potential of a party. Only 6 people can be there. And like I said, I have cameras on the front of my house and the back of my house, so I can see who's coming to and from my house. And if more than 6 people are coming to my house, I have the ability to cancel that booking and show up to my own house and say, hey, you disobeyed the rules and you are no longer allowed to stay here. Because I value our neighbors, I value the city, I value the neighborhood. Really, we're wanting to just provide families the opportunity to visit their kids from OSU, visit family members, or have a college visit potential for a student who's potentially looking at coming to OSU in the future. We hope that if someone was to drive through our neighborhood, that someone couldn't pick out the short-term rental house in that neighborhood. And I think that's a reality with our property because we live there. We're there 5 days a week. And on certain given weekends throughout the year, we'd be looking to rent this house as a short-term rental. And I think if you were to look through our neighborhood, you wouldn't be able to tell who has a short-term rental house. And that's what I would want. That's the standard I would have for this rental. Yes, and I just want to address this that we were operating as a short-term rental before I've been approved for a license. I didn't know I needed to, so that is on me. I take full responsibility of that. I did not know that was a requirement of the city. I should have looked that up. I should have asked for advice from other people. I didn't know that, but the second I was notified of that, I applied for a short-term rental. I went through the full process, and now I'm standing before you guys asking for a short-term rental opportunity. So I imagine it going where someone would request a book. I would have the opportunity to filter them and vet them before approving them. And if I feel comfortable with that person renting our home, especially with us having our first child coming up, that I would approve them, and then I would be able to monitor that home the entire time that person's staying at that home. And I feel like I have a high value of who I'd want to stay at our home. So we work here, we live here, we host community groups in our home. We are building a family here in Stillwater. This is a home that we worked hard for and we value a ton. So thank you guys so much, and I'm available for any questions that you guys have.
Any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, your email address is Stumo. You still with Stumo?
Yes, sir. So we just signed another 3-year contract for a college ministry called Stumo here on campus. That would put me at 8 years post-college being here in Stillwater. This is our home. Our families live in 2 different cities, but this is our home. I never thought coming here that I would stay, but I'm so thankful I am.
Well, that's why I was asking, because if I were a neighbor, as far as short-term rentals go, the situation you're describing is probably one of the least risky ones for neighbors. But if you were going to move in a year, then
for sure
everything would be, up in the air, so to speak. So, so that would be a concern. think I had something else I was going to ask.
If somebody sells their home and the home has a license, a short-term rental license, does the buyer inherit that license, or do you have to start over?
They do not, they have to reapply.
Okay, so
Because even if I bought a new property, I would have to reapply for that specific property, correct?
Yeah, my concern was more about keeping the property in the name and turning it into a full-time short-term rental, but not living there.
Gotcha.
So about how many weekends a year do you foresee renting out?
I see majority of game days because that would be the obvious opportunity there. I would see graduations, and then with part of our job, we do go to a summer project in called Kaleo in Florida for a couple of days or a couple of weeks out of the year. So maybe 20 times. I don't know. That would be kind of a number just coming out of my head if I'm looking at the football games, graduation, potential of that. But
During that Florida trip, would you open it up beyond weekends then?
yes, so that's what I've done in the past. Obviously, like I said, I did not operate with a short-term rental license, and that is my fault, and I accept that fully. If some of my neighbors are like, hey, I'm not comfortable with that, I'm totally okay with just not even doing the summer. Like, my wife and I are totally okay with just doing football games and graduation and things of that nature. But in the past, we did do that. I do have someone in Stillwater that monitors my home throughout that time when I am gone. So it's not like I'm just leaving and no one's looking over my home. I have someone who's monitoring my home the entire time.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. I do have one name on here. I have Opal Maxine Mustard. You just state your name and address for the record, please.
Opal Maxine Mustard. Property has my name as Scarborough on the deed because I've recently remarried. But I live at 2201 West 10th. I've lived there 51 and a half years. Raised my children there. Love the park across the street. I am opposed to this because it will be used mainly for football games and graduations. And I know he may not know this, but the people that have been there this fall when he did rent it had other guests who visited them and came. And yes, there were several people in the house. And yes, the parking there is very limited. They have 4 spaces, but people park, and that is on a curve. It is the second house off of 9th. It is the corner house is rented to college kids, as is the house about 4 down, right straight across the street from me on the other side of 10th and Ridge. The parking is horrible. A few years ago, a fraternity rented the house on the corner and made it into a 5-bedroom because their fraternity house was being renovated. We didn't, as neighbors there, we did not complain because we knew that was very short term. But they still rent it to college kids. I don't know who owns it, but it is occupied by college kids. kids pay no attention to where they park and how they park. There's a park across the street. They go over to the park and have all sorts of parties. And they park on both sides of the street. The fire plug at 10th and Ridge Road is on my corner. Let's say it's in part of my yard. If one of the houses from there and on 10th all the way to Western would have a fire, and people are parked on both sides of that street, there is no way a fire truck could get to that fire plug, okay? Our houses would simply burn down because they either have to go onto Western, come back in on 10th Street, or they have to come up from 12th Street and wind through curvy streets to get there. I feel it is very detrimental. If the city would at least put no parking on one side or the other of that curve, it would help the situation. But I am opposed to any type of temporary rentals, which are mainly for, and these activities do happen on football games and graduation. And the people, there are several people just like me that are older that live in that neighborhood between 9th, around Ridge, on 10th Street. And we've all lived there for 20, 30, and 40 years. And we would like to continue to live there the rest of our days. So that is my objection. If you can get the street department to put up at least no parking on one side or the other of the street there, the same situation is across the park, too. It's very dangerous in case of a fire in that area.
Thank you. So at this time, I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item to please come forward. Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and ask for staff to present our alternatives.
All right. Similar to the previous items, your alternatives are to approve the application, defer for additional discussion, or to deny the application.
Thank you. Any discussion or perhaps a motion from commissioners?
I did live on the 700 block of South Ridge for over 10 years, and yeah, the parking on that street, that section of the street, as she describes, is very limited, and I saw many times where it was very congested. So that is a legitimate complaint. Whether it's a legitimate complaint to deny the application, that's for others to decide.
Seems like if we can enforce or if Airbnb and the host can enforce limiting parking to the driveway and the garage, that this is a much more sort of invested property owner and a more reasonable request. I'd be willing to motion to approve.
Okay.
I don't know all the words I'm supposed to say.
If I understand what you've said, you have made a motion. I've heard a motion to approve the short-term rental at 910 South Ridge as submitted.
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
I'd second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather,
Yes.
Mr. Shannon,
Abstain.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. Van Ruben.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Next item on the agenda is a short-term rental, STR 0140. This is for consideration, discussion, and possible action, including recommendation, approval, or denial for a property addressed at 1215 South Martin Street. We shall hear from staff first.
All right. As stated, this is another application for a short-term rental license for the property addressed as 1215 South Martin Street.
Excuse me, if y'all would like to have a discussion, if you could take it out in the hallway.
All right. As stated, this is a request for a license to operate a short-term rental at 1215 South Martin Street. Here's an area map of the subject property. Similar to the other items, it is located within a residential subdivision near Martin Street. Similarly to the other items, the city cannot enforce private restrictions or covenants, but can give weight to them as part of the deliberative process. And the hearing is to be held similar to a specific use permit hearing. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
No questions for staff. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to give an opportunity for the applicant to come forward. Seeing that the applicant has not come forward, I will open the public hearing to see if there's anyone who would like to speak in opposition of this item. I'm sorry. I'll rephrase that. Would anyone like to speak in favor of this item first? Seeing none, I'll ask if anyone would like to speak in opposition of this item. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Lisa Bozeman. I live at 1222 Martin Street, so across the street from the property. It was brought to our attention, I believe, in October that this house, that they had applied for the application. And maybe it was tabled at the October meeting. And so kind of thought it was perhaps going forward, although there were several of us on the block that were not sure about it. And then recently heard that maybe the owners were going to withdraw and do a long-term rental instead of the short-term. So that's kind of what prompted us to come to see if you knew status, or if they were not here, if it was tabled, if it was canceled, or what would be the next steps, because we do have concerns over parking and access, and, you know, just do we really want a short-term rental in the street?
So I can tell you that there is an application pending with the city for a short-term rental agreement, or short-term rental application. I don't recall that we had this on a previous agenda, so I don't think it had made it to this point in the past.
Okay. Because the letter that we had gotten, it seemed like if we had an objection, it wouldn't have been brought forward. So when we got another notice, we're like, oh, okay, maybe somebody else on the street had objected.
That is the process.
Yeah.
There's so many days for objections, and if an objection is sent to the city, then a hearing is scheduled after that.
So if they don't show up at this time, or if it gets tabled, when does the permit get pulled so that they do not get it, or they have to reapply, or?
They're not
what?
required to appear.
Okay. So, okay.
But I, as long as you're here, I think we would be interested in hearing what your objections would be to a short-term rental at this address.
Mostly it's the parking, because even just for our neighborhood, if neighbors have people over, then it's always very crowded, especially on our street. There's not really enough room for even 2 cars to park in front of my house, and it would be like driveway to driveway, and driveways almost match up, across. So even if I'm trying to back out of mine and somebody's parked across, just with residents, it's enough of an issue. So when there's additional people coming and going, then it's more of a concern. So.
Understood. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item to come forward. No, if you want to, you can come forward, and if you'd like. Can you please state your name and address for us?
Sri Kamandori, and 1303 Martin Street. And it's just one house from mine, and my concern is not mainly for me, but there are a lot of little children in the neighborhood. And I'm particularly careful whenever I back out of my garage, because they are on their little scooters going back and forth. And if you can't even see when you're turning into the road, it can get a little bit dangerous. That was my main concern. If they can have parking on one side of the street instead of both, that will help a lot for that street. Because even when I have guests coming in and they come in their truck or a bigger car, they say, "How do we get into your driveway? You have always parking on both sides, and they can't even back up if there's a car right across my driveway." So that's the main concern.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition of this item?
Hello, I'm Sherilyn Williams, 1302 Martin Street. Same concerns with parking. It's already very congested with just the residents that are in the neighborhood. And already on game days and stuff, people have people over. There's students that live in that neighborhood too. Those houses have lots and lots of people come. So I just don't want to have to deal with more parking problems.
Thank you. I'll ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition on this item.
I'm Sabiha Parveen. I'm living at 1307 Martin Street, also one of the neighbors. I have the same concerns about the parking and also safety-wise. I think there are young children living in the neighborhood, and I'm also concerned about who's going to come and stay there and how responsible they may or may not be about being there. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask staff to return to provide us our alternatives.
Similar to the previous items, you have 3 alternatives, which are to approve, defer for additional discussion, or to deny.
Thank you, Diana.
I'll motion to defer for additional discussion at the January 9th meeting, 2024 at 5:30. We'll give the applicant an opportunity to address all of y'all's concerns regarding the parking and see if they do have some good answers for that as to how they intend to address that. So I will motion to defer.
All right, so I have a motion to table this item to the January 9th Planning Commission meeting in order to get information about parking, street safety, vetting out guests, and other items for house rules. Do I hear a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. We shall now vote.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Van Luven?
Yes.
Motion passes to table to the 9th of January.
Next item on the agenda is a short-term rental, STR 01143. This is consideration, discussion, and possible action, including recommendation, approval, or denial of an application for property addressed as 1106 North Sunnybrook Drive.
All right. As stated, this is another request for a short-term rental license for the property addressed as 1106 North Sunnybrook Drive. Here's an area map of the subject property. It is located near the intersection of Sunnybrook and Manning Street. Once again, located within a residential subdivision. As a reminder, the hearing is held similar to a specific use permit, and the city cannot enforce private restrictive covenants, but they can give weight to them as part of the deliberative process. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
No questions for staff, thank you. I'd like to give an opportunity at this time for the applicant to come forward. Seeing as the applicant is not coming forward, we will open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience this evening that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, we'll ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. I do have two names. I have Jeff Stewart and Charlene Stewart. Yes, if you'd like to come forward and just state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, folks. My name's Jeff Stewart. This is my wife, Charlene Stewart. We live at 1117 East Will Rogers Drive. We're opposed to this bed and breakfast. I'm thinking that we need to keep residential neighborhoods residential. That's the purpose of a residential neighborhood. We don't need motels, bed and breakfast, anything like that in the neighborhood. There's plenty of motels in town. Excuse me. We live right off Manning Street, very busy street. I don't think we need any more traffic in the neighborhood. If there's ever an accident on Perkins Road, they usually divert the traffic down Redbud to Manning and then up to McElroy. Well, more traffic. The other day, my back door is about 200 yards from the residence. I was watching, I don't know if it's the resident that hired them or the neighbor or the city. They cut down trees between the two fences. They threw the trees in the culvert. There's a drainage culvert that runs behind there. Trees are still laying in there. So if it's the residents that hired somebody to come in and cut down the trees and they haven't cleaned up the trash yet, that's a red flag already for me. How they're gonna keep the property up, who's gonna be in the property, are the applicants gonna be living on the property, how many people are gonna be there, who's gonna be there. So we don't know anything about that. And we've been at our residence for approximately 20 years, and we'd like to keep it a residential neighborhood. So.
My name is Charlene Stewart. We live in a place where we have 3 schools. We have an elementary school, we have a junior high, and we have a high school, and they're all within walking distance. We want to keep our safe neighborhood safe. We don't need short-term rentals. We don't need to not know who is in our neighborhood. We have a community of people that we talk to our neighbors. You know, we know our neighbors. We visit each other's homes, and we want to keep it as a community, as, you know, neighbors, not knowing who's coming and going and the safety issue. And I mean, do anybody do background checks on the people that they're renting to? We don't know. I mean, we have no way of knowing. And I mean, obviously the people aren't here to say that, you know, alleviate our concerns.
That's another thing. I think the applicants should be present. If they want this so bad, they should be here. If they're not here, then they're just renting it out to make a buck. They're not caring about who's in there, what the property looks like, or anything.
And we also have 2 elderly assisted living right next door. We have 2 of them. We have 2 churches right next door, right 2 doors down, we have a church and another church right up across the street. It's not meant for, lack of a better word, a flop house, because these places usually start out really nice and then they
get trashed.
Then they get trashed. We lived on a street that had
Ms.
these-
Stewart, we do have a
I'm
limit
sorry.
on time.
I'm sorry.
No,
Okay.
but I think we got the general gist of your concerns from both of you, that it would be how the property is going to be maintained, congested, additional traffic, vetting out who's staying in
Well, our
in the
values,
home.
our property values. I mean, that's not going to increase our property values. And this is a home that my husband and I would like to leave to our children.
Yeah.
I mean, with the economy and stuff now, I mean, they're not even going to be able to have the American dream, so they're going to depend on us.
Thank you. At this time, I'd ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to this item. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and ask for staff to present our alternatives.
All right. Once again, the alternatives are to approve the application, defer for additional discussion, or to deny the application.
I'll motion to defer for additional discussion with the applicant. I agree, they should also be here. I don't know why they're not here tonight, and so I'm not going to hold that against them because life happens. But I would like to talk to them about the questions that you all rose regarding safety, who's going to be there, parking, traffic, everything above that we like to talk to them about. So, yeah, we'll defer this. I motion to defer this till January 9th meeting.
We have a motion on the table to, we have a motion to table this item to the January 9th Planning Commission meeting for the additional information as has been stated. Do I hear a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather?
Yes.
Mr. Shannon?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Van Leuven?
Yes.
This item is tabled.
Next item on the agenda is a short-term rental, STR 0144. Consideration, discussion, and possible action, including recommendation, approval, or denial of an application for a property addressed at 1301 West Richmond Road.
All right. As stated, the last item on our agenda for public hearing tonight is another request for a short-term rental license for the property addressed as 1301 West Richmond Road. Here's an area map of the subject property. It is located at the intersection of Richmond Road and Falls Drive. Similar to the other items, the hearing is to be held similar to a specific use permit, and the city cannot enforce private restrictions or covenants, but can give weight to them as part of the process. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
I do have one question for staff. Is this correct that this particular property is in a two-family residential district? And
That's correct.
RT? Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to give the applicant an opportunity to come forward.
Hello, my name is Carissa Gabalieri. I purchased this home in 2020 with my now ex-husband. We got divorced last year, and I had a couple roommates move in last year, and they've since moved out. And this past semester, I thought about trying Airbnb in one of my guest rooms. I guess I did have 2 bedrooms getting rented out. Now I have a roommate in one of the rooms, and now it's just one room, and I didn't realize I needed an application with the city, so I apologize for that. I did get the notification in the mail, and I submitted the application after that. So this is my home. I do live here, and it's just my guest bedroom that I'm renting out. I make sure that the guests or the people trying to book, they need to talk to me and send me a message before they can book. And I make sure to know who's coming and their purpose of the visit. And when they come, I like to make sure that I'm there to greet them, and then I'm around the whole visit I just want to make sure everything's smooth. I also want peace in the neighborhood, and I don't want to cause any disturbances. It's a very quiet and peaceful neighborhood. So I just want to keep the peace, and I don't want to cause any disruptions. I do have ample parking for the guests. I have a large driveway. They don't have to park in the street or anything. And the guests I have had so far have been superb. I haven't had any issues. I've only had parents of OSU students coming to visit their kids and or people attending football games. And that's only been couples or individuals, and they've all been very calm and quiet and very respectful of the space. And they acknowledge that this is my space, and they're just staying in part of it. Home. I love my home. I've put a lot of work and love. And if I ever had any issues, I would immediately fix it or call the police or anything. I don't want.
Well, I'm assuming that with you actually being there the whole time while they're there as well, you're highly vetting them, making sure that these are people that you want in your house, and
Yes.
you're definitely not allowing any partying or anything like that. You're really
No.
taking care of it, being
Yes.
that you're there the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, it's me, and then I have my roommate, and we're both female. We definitely want it to be a safe space. I have my boyfriend that comes when somebody visits just to make sure everything's safe. But everybody's been wonderful, and I would have them again. They've all been wonderful people, and it's been great getting to meet people who are visiting. And I think it's helping make their visit to Stillwater a nice one. They've all really enjoyed the space.
Have you ever had more than one or two cars of the people visiting?
I don't believe so. I think I had 2 rooms at one point, and so there was 2 cars for each couple attending the game or the event. I think at one point somebody, like, their parents came and they were like switching out cars, so their toddler, they could pick up their toddler and they'd stay with the grandparents. So that wasn't very long though. It wasn't overnight.
Did I understand you have 2 rooms? Are both of them for Airbnb, or one of them has a more long-term renter in it?
Yes, I now have a roommate in one of my rooms, so now only one is for short term.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Oh, I remember one more thing. I do have house rules. Only 2 people, 1 to 2 people per stay, and they obviously can't have parties or events. And there's quiet hours that are designated. So yeah, I do make sure they're good people before they can come. So thank you so much.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to open the public hearing and ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to speak in favor of this item. Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone who would like to speak in opposition. I do have one name on the list, Rick Wallstead.
My name's Rick Wallstead. I live at 1310 Falls Drive, and I object to the short-term rental. And really, it's basically, as you saw on the map, that it's our entrance and exit to our falls, to our whole homeowner, or to the whole subdivision. And if we have any parking there, it can be very dangerous. We have a lot of kids that come across, not only in our neighborhood, but come across that walk. I walk every morning. So those are some of my concerns. Diane has mentioned several times that you do not enforce covenants, and I'm not asking you to, but from a weighted standpoint, in our covenants, it does say that there's no business. And I guess my question is Airbnb not a business? And if it is or isn't, then I would like to know what a definition the city uses as a business. And I mean, we can run the clock. You do whatever you need to do. But
Okay.
that's one of my main questions it's stated specifically in our covenants, there is to be no business. And so my question would be is how does the city look to as far as the Airbnb being a business?
I feel like Airbnb is probably more analogous to a long-term rental, which is not really considered a business, rather than analogous to a commercial enterprise. Although I'm not the legal expert, I don't see them in the same bucket.
I would have to say that's the way that we've looked at it in the past.
Okay,
is that
so
it-
based on that,
yeah.
I just did some real quick Googling. I mean,
Sure.
that's what everybody does, right? So, and it says, is running an Airbnb considered a business? The answer is yes. It is a commercial activity, but because it involves renting out a short-term rental property regularly and getting income from it. So Airbnb hosts are considered self-employed business owners. So that, like I said, from our standpoint, it's grandfathered into the covenants. Obviously, we will change our covenants to do this, but Carissa will already have that governed in from what it is. I heard you guys mention earlier that it doesn't go to the next owner.
Correct.
So,
not
that was one of
transferable.
my other concerns. But that being said, I mean, I would like to know what the city considers a business. What's your definition so that I can write that into the covenants so that this doesn't happen to us again?
So I would say that this body in front of you here, the planning commissioner, are not equipped to answer that question.
Sure.
So
I'm not equipped.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for your time. If you have any other questions.
And I was going to say, the city is actively working to come out with better guidelines for us for short-term rentals.
Yeah, but you also mentioned that the guidelines that we're following under right now are already grandfathered in for
Correct.
these applications. So
Correct.
that doesn't help me at all.
I was just saying, as
True.
for your covenants, maybe give it a month or two, and hopefully the city will have a better definition of what they're looking at, and
Sure.
that'll help you write your covenants better.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate it. Just a moment. I will ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. And we will let the applicant have an opportunity to address all the questions that have been asked before we go back and deliberate.
My name is Ladd Hudgens. I live at 1308 Falls Drive, about 100 yards from the applicant. I guess I want to reiterate just something that was already spoken to, and that is Falls Drive is the only entrance and exit to our addition. So it does have a lot of walkers, people who walk there with small children and dogs. And so we're considered a quiet neighborhood and a safe place to walk. So when we talk about cars and parking and people who may not be as familiar with the neighborhood, then that becomes a little more important when you recognize what kind of neighborhood we are. So what I'm really concerned about when we open doors like this, we might have somebody now that adheres to that, but what about guest of guest? If we get into a situation that this grows into a situation where we're renting the property on weekends to people who come and decide they want to entertain guests, and they come and they don't park in the right spots and they park on what is Falls Drive. So parking, I think, is a really important part of it. Then there's a second area we haven't talked about, and that is behind our properties is a pond. And some of us are concerned of the liability of that. If someone comes, again, it's a guest, and a child wanders down to that pond, falls in the pond, are we all in that neighborhood liable for that? We know when somebody comes into our area to fish and doesn't have permission and still stumps their toe, and then we are liable for that individual. So that pond adds an extra threat. And if they're adults, as they are now, that's fine. If they come and they have children who's going to be there to watch that pond? So that extra liability is another item. I'm just concerned that we open the door like this, then how can we be sure that we don't get somebody in there that's maybe not quite as good a guest? So I am opposed to changing this classification.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition to this item to please come forward.
I'm Roger Duke. I live at 1302 Falls Drive. So I just wanted to reiterate that I agree with the other two objectors for largely the same reasons. Property values also, in addition to the safety, the parking, all that good stuff. But what Ladd addressed last, I think, is one of my biggest concerns, and that's the liability around that pond. Because there are several houses, including the applicants, that the yard goes straight into the pond. And if someone were to get hurt or worse in that pond, that could be a very serious liability issue for all of us around there. So I appreciate the good intentions of the applicant, but there's no guarantee that they're going to maintain those conditions they talk about, right? Once they get the permit, they could pretty much do whatever they want. So thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I would ask if there's anyone else in the audience that would like to speak in opposition. Seeing none, go ahead and close the public hearing, but we would give the opportunity for the applicant to come forward and address any of the questions that have been raised.
Hi. I appreciate everybody coming forward and addressing those concerns. I did forget to mention earlier, I talked to my HOA president and she discussed with the board committee. They checked the covenants to make sure this was okay, and I was worried about item 6 as well. But they concluded that it was okay and allowed in the covenants. So currently, the current covenants, there's no restrictions. I have a letter from my president, but we do have a meeting on December 10th, and we are going to vote about having an Airbnb in the neighborhood because this was an issue. But the new covenant says that it's exclusive use of the house, and I also agree. I would never allow exclusive use of the house, and I don't think anybody else should, in this neighborhood at least. So I think I would still be protected under those other the new HOA rules. I am at the entrance and exit to the Falls neighborhood. We do have 3 neighborhood divisions by my house. I'm on a busy road. It's Richmond Road, and there's constantly traffic. That's not involving me. It is Richmond Road, and then it goes into a gravel road, and a lot of big trucks like to drive really quick on that road. So while the neighborhood's quiet, there's always been that issue. Just with the road itself. And as for guests of guests, I wouldn't allow that. I'm home. I don't want a lot of extra people coming. It would just be, there's strict rules about only the people who are booking my room to be there. As for the pond, it's true. Could be a liability, and I would not want that. I do have it on my listing as a warning. There's an area that says things that guests should be aware of, and I have the pond as a precaution. And so I haven't had any kids stay. I had a toddler, but they didn't go outside at all. But I would make sure to talk to the family staying there, especially if they had kids, to be really careful around the pond and to not let their kids run around by themselves. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So at this time, we'd ask staff to present our alternatives.
All right. Similarly to the previous items, the alternatives for this item are to approve the application, defer for additional discussion, or deny.
Thank you.
As far as the STRs go that we've seen, this seems like the safest one, the best one for the neighborhood. I've always thought that ones where the homeowners live in it and rent it out on the weekends are the ones where the homeowners are going to care the most and vet the guests the most. The fact that the homeowner is actually staying there with the guests, to me, is just even an extra precaution for them wanting the best for their home and for their neighborhood as well. The fact that she also has talked to the HOA president and they've approved that, and it sounds like are meeting again about it. I think that kind of leaves that up to them at that point.
I would agree. It sounds like this applicant has been very good at following up on her due diligence to see how she may or may not be able to work within those. And it seems like there's an active HOA that could step in at any time. And I would agree with that.
I'll motion to approve the application.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. We shall now vote.
I'm sorry, who's second?
Right there.
Thank you. 'Cause you're doing the road. I'm not writing. My apologies. Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Van Leuven?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items from staff, planning commissioners, or the city attorney for discussion and possible action. We have up the next planning commission meeting is December 19th, which we've noted this evening. And the second item under 3 is to review and approve the planning commission 2024 meeting schedule. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I'd make a motion to approve the 2024 planning schedule.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We shall now vote.
Ms. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Prather?
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Mr. Van Leuven?
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Motion passes 5-0.
It's 5-0.
Last item on the agenda is adjournment.
We have a motion?
Do you have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Shanahan?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
And Mr. Van Leuven?
Yes.
This meeting adjourned. I thought I would get it. Yeah, I'll follow you.
Thank you, everyone.